In 1978, a janitor named Ronald Reed began investing his savings in the stock market. He was not a financial genius, not a tech entrepreneur, not an heir to any fortune. He worked at a gas station for much of his early life, then cleaned floors at J.C. Penney for decades. He drove a used car. He packed his own lunch. And when he died in 2014 at the age of 92, the world discovered that he had quietly accumulated $8 million. His neighbors were stunned. His community was baffled. How does a man who earns a janitor's salary die with $8 million? The answer is not complicated, but it is the kind of answer most people spend their entire lives never arriving at. Ronald Reed saved a little, and then he invested the rest. He understood something that separates average financial outcomes from extraordinary ones. That saving alone is never the path to financial independence. Saving at best keeps you afloat. What builds wealth, real wealth, is what you do with your savings once you have set them aside. Today, we are examining 10 reasons why saving alone, no matter how diligently, no matter how consistently, will always keep you exactly where you are. Average. Reason 1. Inflation is a silent tax on your savings. Begin with the most invisible thief in personal finance: inflation. When you put $1,000 in a savings account and earn 3 or 4% annually, it feels like your money is growing. The number on your statement rises, and that is reassuring. But the real question is not whether your balance is increasing. The real question is whether your purchasing power is increasing. And that is an entirely different calculation. Over the last 30 years, inflation has averaged just under 3% per year in the United States. In years where it spikes, as it did between 2021 and 2023, climbing as high as 9%, savings accounts returned a fraction of what inflation consumed. Your money grew in number and shrank in value simultaneously. John D. Rockefeller, who understood capital better than almost anyone in American history, was fond of saying that a dollar put to work was worth more than a dollar saved. He was not speaking abstractly. He was speaking from the mathematical reality that idle money loses its purchasing power every single year, slowly, silently, without anyone writing it on a statement. Saving protects your money from being spent. It does not protect your money from being eroded. Inflation is a tax you never see on a receipt, but pay every year you leave your wealth sitting still. Reason 2. Saving has a ceiling. Investing has none. Here is the most important mathematical reality in personal finance. Saving is linear and investing is exponential. When you save $100, you have $100. When you earn 4% interest, you have 104. The growth is real, but it is additive, building by roughly the same amount each year on a narrow base. Compound investing works differently. When your money earns returns and those returns earn returns, the growth becomes self-generating. Peter Lynch, who managed the Fidelity Magellan Fund for 13 years and delivered an annualized return of nearly 29%, described compound growth as the closest thing to a financial perpetual motion machine. The longer it runs, the less effort it requires from you. Consider two people who begin with $20,000 at age 25. The saver earns 4% annually in a high-yield savings account. The investor earns a market average 10% in diversified index funds. By age 65, the saver has approximately $96,000. The investor has nearly $1 million. Same starting amount, same discipline, different vehicle. The gap between them is not hustle or talent. It is the difference between a ceiling and an open sky. Reason 3. The tax code was never written for savers. Most people understand that taxes exist. Far fewer understand that the tax code is a set of deliberate incentives, and those incentives almost universally reward people who own assets and penalize people who simply save. Interest income from savings accounts is taxed as ordinary income at the same rate as your paycheck. If you earn $50,000 per year and collect $1,200 in savings interest, that interest is taxed at your marginal rate, which could be 22, 24, or even 32%. Contrast this with long-term capital gains, the tax applied to investments held for more than 1 year. Most investors pay 15%. Some pay 0. Qualified dividends are taxed at similarly preferential rates. The difference is not accidental. The tax code has been shaped over decades to encourage the deployment of capital, to move money out of dormancy and into productive investment. Savers pay full freight. Investors receive discounts the government has deliberately built in. Andrew Carnegie, who built the largest steel empire in American history, understood that wealth was not simply about earning more, it was about losing less. The tax architecture of savings means that savers are always paying the full toll. Investors take a different road entirely. Reason 4. Idle capital has a cost you never see on a statement. Economists call it opportunity cost. Most people never calculate it. Every dollar sitting in your savings account has an alternative. It could be in the stock market, in a business, in real estate, in a bond generating steady income. The fact that it sits in savings earning 4% means it is simultaneously not earning 10, not earning 12, not earning 15. The cost of this choice does not appear on your bank statement. There is no line that reads, "This month, your savings account cost you $600 in foregone returns." But the cost is real, and over decades, it compounds just as aggressively as the returns you never earned. Ray Dalio, who founded Bridgewater Associates and built one of the most successful investment firms in history, has described holding cash, including cash in savings accounts, as having a guaranteed negative real return over time. He does not mean this metaphorically. He means that cash reliably loses ground against the alternatives available to any investor willing to deploy it thoughtfully. The opportunity is always standing next to your savings account. Every year you delay introducing them, the distance between where you are and where you could have been grows wider. Reason 5. Saving builds security. Only investing builds independence. There is an underappreciated distinction between financial security and financial independence, and most people who save diligently achieve the first while never reaching the second. Financial security means you have enough of a cushion to weather emergencies, to survive a job loss, a medical event, an unexpected crisis without falling into debt. Financial security is real and important, but it is, by definition, a defensive position. It is armor, not a vehicle. It protects you from the worst. It does not carry you toward the best. Financial independence means something categorically different. It means your assets generate enough income to cover your expenses without requiring you to trade time for money. Whether you work or not, whether you are well or ill, whether your employer keeps you or lets you go, your financial position continues to sustain itself. Thomas Stanley, who spent decades studying the actual behavior of American millionaires, found that the defining characteristic of the wealthy was not how much they saved, but how efficiently they converted savings into income-producing assets. Saving was the preparation. Investing was the act. The people who built lasting wealth were not those with the largest savings balances. They were the ones who understood exactly what savings were for. Reason 6. Savers subtract, the wealthy multiply. Saving is fundamentally a subtractive exercise. You earn money, you spend less than you earn, you set aside the difference. It is responsible, disciplined, and ultimately insufficient. The psychological framing of saving is built around not losing, not spending what you have, not falling behind, not running out. That is a worthy goal. But it is a poverty prevention mindset more than a wealth-building one. The wealthy think in multiplication. They ask not, how do I keep more of what I have, but how do I deploy what I have so it creates more? The mental model is entirely different, and it produces entirely different behaviors. Sam Walton, who built Walmart from a single five-and-dime store in Rogers, Arkansas, reinvested nearly every dollar the business generated back into expansion for the first 20 years. He was not hoarding cash in a savings account. He was multiplying. Each store funded the next. Each dollar deployed returned many more. By the time Walmart went public in 1970, his compounded stakes had created something that no amount of saving could have generated in several lifetimes. Saving preserves what exists. Multiplying creates what did not. The two strategies do not produce the same destination. Reason 7. Assets earn while you sleep. Savings only keep pace. There is a principle in wealth psychology that the truly wealthy are paid while they sleep. This is not a metaphor. It describes a specific financial mechanism that savings accounts cannot replicate. When you invest in dividend-paying stocks, income arrives on a quarterly basis, regardless of whether you went to work that day or made any new decisions. When you own a rental property, rent arrives monthly while your attention is elsewhere. When you hold index funds, the companies within them are generating profits and growing in value without requiring anything from you. Savings accounts also earn passively, but they earn on a fixed base that only grows when you add to it. There is no workforce behind them, no customers, no revenue, no products. They are a number that increases slowly, entirely dependent on the deposits you continue to make. Assets are claims on productive activity. When you own shares in a company, you own a fraction of everything that company produces, sells, and earns. The employees of that company work every day to increase the value of what you hold. The savings account has no employees. The savings account has no product. It has only your balance and a modest interest rate. This is the compounding asymmetry that Ronald Read understood and quietly exploited over 60 years of a janitor's wages. Reason 8. The velocity principle. Money in motion creates wealth. Economists speak of the velocity of money, the frequency with which currency circulates and generates economic activity. In personal finance, the principle applies directly. Money in motion creates more than money at rest. Wealth builders deploy capital. They move money toward opportunities with returns higher than the cost of holding it. This requires analysis, patience, and some tolerance for uncertainty. But it is the fundamental mechanism by which ordinary capital becomes extraordinary wealth. Savers instinctively reduce velocity. They hold. They wait. They accumulate the comfortable reassurance of a growing balance. And because minimum risk has been selected, minimum return is what the money produces. Phil Knight, who built Nike from a handshake agreement with a Japanese shoe manufacturer, reinvested so aggressively in the early years that his accountant once warned him the company was technically insolvent every 6 months. Knight believed the velocity of reinvestment was the business's greatest competitive advantage. A dollar circulating through inventory, product development, and marketing was worth 10 times a dollar sitting in reserve. Capital deployed intelligently moves you forward. Capital held still keeps you exactly where you are. Reason 9. Saving quietly builds a scarcity mindset. There is a psychological consequence to years of disciplined saving that rarely gets discussed. It trains you to think in scarcity rather than abundance. Saving requires saying no, resisting purchases, delaying gratification, measuring every dollar against the cost of losing it. These are virtues in moderation. But over time, they can calcify into a worldview that sees financial life as a zero-sum game, where every dollar spent is a dollar lost, and every opportunity carries more risk than reward. The wealthy have generally developed a different relationship with capital. They ask not, "Can I afford this?" but "What does this produce?" Not, "What if I lose it?" but "What is the opportunity cost of not deploying it?" This is not recklessness. It is a fundamentally different framework, one that treats capital as a tool with a job to do rather than a treasure to be guarded. Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindsets maps directly onto this financial psychology. Savers often develop a fixed financial mindset. Wealth is a finite quantity to be protected. Investors develop a growth orientation. Wealth is a dynamic capacity that expands through deliberate action. The mindset you develop shapes not just how you manage money. It determines which opportunities you notice, which risks you consider acceptable, and ultimately, which financial future you build. Reason 10. A growing savings account feels like progress. And that is the danger. Perhaps the most dangerous thing about saving alone is how good it feels. Watching your savings balance climb from $10,000 to $20,000, from $20,000 to $50,000, produces a genuine sense of accomplishment. It should. It represents real discipline, real sacrifice, and real delayed gratification. But it also produces something more subtle and more problematic: the feeling that you are building wealth when you are only stockpiling it. Progress and accumulation are not the same thing. Progress implies movement toward a destination. Accumulation is simply having more of what you already have. A growing savings account is accumulation. Compound investment growth, where returns generate returns, where assets produce income that acquires more assets, that is progress. The comfort of a rising savings balance can become a ceiling disguised as a ladder. It satisfies the psychological need to feel financially responsible without delivering the outcome that real financial independence requires. And because it feels so productive, it often delays the moment when a person makes the more uncomfortable, more uncertain, more powerful decision to put capital to work. Warren Buffett was once asked what separated the investors who built generational wealth from those who merely saved successfully. He said the difference was what they did after they had saved enough to feel safe. The savers kept saving. The wealth builders started deploying. Which group are you in? Ronald Read did not become wealthy because he saved. He became wealthy because he saved enough to invest, and then invested with patience, discipline, and the one resource every human being has in equal measure: time. The saving was preparation. The investing was the act. The 10 reasons we have explored today are not arguments against saving. An emergency fund is not optional. Financial security is worth building. But there is a moment, and most people miss it entirely, where the purpose of saving must shift from protecting what you have to deploying it in pursuit of what you could build. That moment is not defined by a specific dollar amount. It is defined by a decision to stop thinking about your money as a number to grow slowly in a protected account and start thinking about it as capital with a job to do. Ronald Read made that decision in 1978 on a janitor's salary. And 40 years later, $8 million confirmed that he had understood something most people never learn. The path from average to wealthy is not a longer version of saving. It is something else entirely. It begins the day you decide that what you have earned is worth putting to work.